And we're doing episode 31. There's a start.
There's a start.
I just started the stopwatch, so now I can do that every time, and that's gonna.
Let's just jump right into it.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
BBC News article by Owen Amos, Inside the White House Bible Study Group. Yeah. For the first time in at least 100 years, the U.S. cabinet has a Bible study group. What do they learn? What does Donald Trump make of it? And why aren't women allowed to teach? It goes pretty, well, I wouldn't say in-depth, but it gives you quite a bit of information on...
It's a lengthy article.
So let's just... I'm going to talk about the first thing that jumped out at me. Probably
Sure.
the worst part of that article was the fact that the Bible makes it really clear there is no place for women in leadership in the church. It was like in the church and something else. I was just like, oh, man.
The church and in a marriage.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Ew,
dude. I mean,
To
to
be
be
fair, the
is
Bible does make it pretty clear,
But
though.
there is a prohibition of female leadership in marriage and female leadership in the church.
In the church,
And those
right.
are clear in the scripture.
So
It doesn't
that's-
mean in an egalitarian sense that a woman is of lesser importance.
Of course
It's just
not.
that they have different roles.
Oh, no. I mean,
So,
but
and this
yeah,
is- this is
obviously
the-
the Bible's pretty
This
clear.
is what I said earlier about this article. Like, he doesn't reference specifically in the Bible where it says there is a prohibition of female leadership in marriage.
Oh, there
Like,
absolutely is, though. I can
and by the way, okay, fine. And by the way, even if there is, I bet you there's
explicit.
portions. I bet you that's fine. I bet you there's portions of the Bible that kind of tell stories or show scenarios where a female does have somewhat of a leadership in marriage. You know, it's just there's so many stories in it. What do we? Is it that black and white? I just it's
You
tough
have
for
to
me to believe that.
remember,
Sure.
and I have to be very careful about the way I word this. You have to remember the time period from which the Bible,
Sure.
as far as we know, it came. And
That's right.
it was. I mean, as traditional. Oh, I say traditional. It was very much patriarchal. I don't know how to say
No,
that.
yeah,
word.
no, I
Like
got you, I got you.
women were essentially seen as property, like genuinely just secondhand citizens, and barely that.
Yeah.
So that being said, though,
So then why is this guy explaining it so literally? Oh my
Like-
goodness.
a light Google, though, gives you Old Testament example. Now, this is from ChristianBibleReference.org. Women were mostly in a subservient role, but a number of women are mentioned as leaders,
Well,
prophets of Israel,
you
including
go.
Miriam, Deborah, Esther, Hadula, and Ethela. I probably butchered all of those names, but... I mean,
Although,
there was prophets.
again, consider the source you're reading here. I would love to read those stories because this is obviously ChristianBibleReference.org. If you want to look...
Here we go. Exodus 15:20. Then Miriam, the prophet, Aaron's sister, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women followed her with timbrels dancing. Deborah, Judges 4,
Wow, that's-
verses 4 through 5. Now Deborah, as a prophet,
Yeah, but that's not leadership in marriage. Or leadership in the church, that is.
Look
There
at
you
this,
go.
look at
yeah,
this.
being
There
a
you go.
prophet is...
No, yeah, for real. That's what I'm saying. It just feels so black and white. Like the things he says. I'm like, oh, what is going on here?
And then
Yeah,
right here,
but-
then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me, blah, 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 blah. Like, she's telling
Sure.
somebody else, go do this.
Sure.
And at the end, so Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. You know, so I mean, and this is
Yeah.
just a light Google, I'm sure. Given
Mhm.
time and really giving a shit.
First
you could find
Corinthians
I think-
14:34 to 35. Women should remain silent in the churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission, as the law says. 35. If they want to inquire about something, they should ask their own husbands at home, for it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church.
Dude.
Come on. Talk about
Oh,
a
there you
light
go.
Google.
Bible.
Talk about a light
Not
Google.
fun
That's
again.
the,
First
that's the point,
Corinthians
though.
11:3. But I want you to understand that Christ is the head of every man, and the husband is the head of his wife, and
Mm.
God is the head of Christ. And then Ephesians here.
I see that hierarchy.
Yeah.
So women are on the bottom. There you go. Get fired up. Oh, so I think let's get this out of the way too. I don't
Sure.
think any one of us would have a problem with cabinet members having a Bible study. That is not the issue here.
No.
The issue here is
Well,
the person who is running the Bible study and his super literal interpretation of the Bible And you guys are, I love the fact that this is how much better we're getting at this, because you guys are just like Googling things and finding real facts. It's so easy to find these facts from the Bible. This is in the Bible. And I love that you guys are saying this, because you guys are both showing that they're both sides of it. It's like, what are we doing?
Sure.
What are we doing?
Yeah, I think that's the problem here, specifically with the Bible, is that you literally have contradictions.
Right.
Oh, of course. I mean, you could take any holy text and I'm sure you could find contradictions.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And I feel like to some extent that's what makes the Bible a bit more versatile, because you can interpret it and understand it in a myriad of ways. I'm just saying, like, there's a reason people appreciate that piece of work, appreciate the Christian faith. And I mean, at one point or another, you know, it was obviously very detrimental to our society, but it has changed. It has reformed. The church has changed on their stances.
I think for me, where I cringed the hardest is right here where I have it on the article itself. In 1996, Drollinger's wife, Danielle, was executive director of a political action committee in California, trying to unseat liberals from the state legislature and get Christians elected.
I read that.
That is not separation of church and state by any stretch of anyone's imagination. That is very clear intent of what you're trying to do.
We've touched on this a bit before, but it's really hard to not. I mean, to some people, faith is everything. So why would you not ask that from somebody who's supposed to represent you in Congress? You know what I mean? That's tough.
So, and look, if I may play devil's advocate just for a little bit here.
Sure.
What did the founding fathers mean by separation of church and state, right? We can have a discussion about that. And I say that because this guy says, I believe in institutional separation, but not influential separation. I don't know that I disagree with that. Like,
I don't know that those two are very different.
Hang on. It's easy to forget that we could have a government that literally mandates a religion. We don't. It's not that bad. It is not that bad. And I know that's the extreme side of it, but yeah, we could debate. And Chad, tell me why you think that way. If you think they're not that different, that's fine. Just why do you think that way?
No, I mean, I get what you're saying, and I very much, I have to say that I appreciate the fact that these guys are transparent with what they're doing. I mean, the guy, I forget the pastor's name, but he posts weekly the sermons that he's giving to that cabinet prayer group.
Yep.
But I mean, and you said before, I don't know that we would all disagree that people from the cabinet are meeting together and having a prayer group.
I don't care about that at all.
To some extent, I want to agree with that, but also, like, if you have a prayer group, why are you doing it within the cabinet with people of the cabinet? It kind of ties it a bit more to politics in that sense. Like, why aren't these guys don't have a prayer group or a weekly Bible study outside of where they work? You know what I mean? So, I don't know.
Well, let's get down to the difference between influential and institutional. Right? Because that's really where he's saying that there's a difference, and it sounds like Cyril's saying that there's a bit of a difference. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
So institutional would be, because it's written in the Bible, we must implement it. Like, to me, it's almost like the caliphate with ISIS, right? That's institutionalizing.
You're
religion.
right. Yeah. Well, it's very much the idea of a caliphate is like I'm pretty sure a part of the Quran, if I'm not mistaken, is having a theocratic type of state where Islam is the main concern.
And I think the only difference, and maybe I'm stretching this a bit, but the only difference between Christianity and Islam is that in the Quran, it's literally spelled out how to run your society. Whereas in the Bible, it's not,
a bit more ambiguous.
It's not necessarily
I would say
law.
I would argue that there are a lot bigger differences there, but that's not a conversation for here or there. But I do get what you're saying, that the Bible doesn't explicitly say, or at least it isn't a very common theme and very one-dimensional type of the state needs to be run by believers, I suppose, and the state needs to be centered around believers and the belief and Christianity, which we've tried it before. It doesn't work well.
Let me ask Cyril
I
then.
think
What's
far
the
as I'm
difference?
concerned.
Like, why is it okay to be influential or to have influence as opposed to institutionalize?
Because I'm just when I hear institutional, I just think the extreme of like you must
Right.
believe this.
Yeah.
That's not what's going on here.
No.
I think Chad, there's no question that I think the optics of this are bad, right? This article alone shows you that. I just don't know that.
Yeah.
This is another one of those things where we talk about it, we dive into a little bit, and we definitely are like, look, the optics look bad because some of these people, what they're saying is pretty outrageous and hateful, and I don't know what's going on here. But it's look, it's not like Donald Trump tomorrow is going to come out and say everybody must be a Christian in this country, or you're going to go.
No,
go to
of
prison or
course
something.
not. I don't.
So I don't really care. Honestly, if you don't want them in power, then go vote. Hey, I'm talking to you, young people who don't ever vote and who are the ones who think this way. Jeez.
Well, I don't think that's exclusive to young people. I mean,
no, that's fair. I shouldn't have. I'm stereotyping there. Stereotypes exist for a reason, but that's right. No, it's not.
Well, what
Just
I'm
young
saying
people.
specifically is that you also have a sect of people, I believe, like a certain gentleman that we all know, who is now refusing to participate whatsoever in consuming any sort of information.
Is he refusing to vote too?
Of course he is.
Yeah, absolutely.
He abstains from all political.
For me, that's an easy thing to
anything.
argue against. It's
Of
like,
course.
look, you have to live in this society. You have a chance to at least make choices about who is, running that society and creating the norms and morals for that society, and you just refuse to do it. Look, there's a little bit there of, hey, you're lucky you're in America because you can just sit here, have a nice life.
Yeah,
while
he
you
has
don't
the
even have to
freedom
participate.
not participate.
Yeah,
He absolutely does. But But if everybody stuck their head in the sand because they don't like what they're hearing and seeing, everything would fall apart. You know what I mean? You have to participate. Yeah. I mean, whether or not you like government, it's necessary. So we have to at least try and do our best at it.
Does he ever complain about politics, or does he just not even talk politics?
No, not even. He just abstains.
Good. Because some people are like, oh, I don't vote because I don't care. And then they just complain. And it's like, look, if you didn't vote, then
he abstains.
Because that happened to Colin Kaepernick. He was taking a lot of stances and this and that. And then he said, oh, I didn't vote. And it was just like,
oh, what? That's
weird. You can Google that. He didn't vote. And it's just like, I'm not saying that he still shouldn't have a voice. Of course you should have a voice. Come on, man. Why don't you vote? Yo, just vote.
That's how you have a voice, is by voting. I mean, among other things, but that's one of the most
At face value, you're right, Chad. At face value, you're right. Yeah.
I think my whole thing, though, with this is that it's very hard for people to become radicalized for common sense. And it's very easy to radicalize people based on a religion and to have that type of influence.
Right.
I would say dogma.
It's not wrong.
Any dogma.
It's not wrong to have that influence, right? Everyone's going to have their own biases and opinions and feelings and whatnot, but it's also, I mean, we can see throughout history when people become radicalized about something, it doesn't necessarily work out very well.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And again, like I said, nobody gets radicalized about common sense. Nobody's like, oh my God, you're an idiot because we could have just done X. Whatever common sense is in that situation, nobody goes crazy over that.
Going back to the article, oh man, let's just react to this when I'm done reading it. One Democrat struggling with her party's support for same-sex marriage contacted Drollinger for advice. He explained the Bible's teaching as he saw it. The next Bible study, she said, that was really good. Can't necessarily stand publicly on it, but it's going on in my heart. He says he won't tell her how to vote on the issue. Voicing opposition to gay marriage might cost her an election because she's a Democrat. And he goes, but at the same time, she's going to have to think, what's different between that and a prostitute? A prostitute.
I read that.
Maintain a salary. Are you, as a Christian legislator, growing in Christ, selling your convictions in order to stay making a salary or have influence? Dude, what the heck?
Wait, but let's keep going to the next line.
I'll never say it that
graphically to a member, but you get my idea. I'm perfectly okay telling you heathens that read the BBC about this prostitute comparison. But I would never say that to
he also
oh goodness.
He also says later in this article, if I remember correctly, that he never informs cabinet members on how to vote. He doesn't inform politicians on how to vote. But it should be obvious in his teachments and in the Bible's teachments how legislation should fall. He says he leaves a trail of breadcrumbs, metaphysically or metaphorically, obviously, in his sermons to let people know how they should probably vote to fall in line with Christian teachments. So how do you guys feel about that? I mean, he's basically saying like, yeah, obviously I'm not going to tell these people how to vote, but I'm more or less trying to be real obvious about it with my sermons.
Well, I guess this goes back to what Cyril was just talking about, right? What is the difference between institutionalizing and influencing? My fear is, and again, and I know Cyril doesn't like when I say this, but here we go, tinfoil hat. Influence can potentially become institutionalization.
Right.
And that's the fear.
That's a slippery slope. I hate using that term, but sure, yeah, that's slippery slope.
Until we find a better way to describe it, we're kind of stuck with that term.
I'm not a fan of that term. I think I'm not a fan of that term because it always gets misconstrued in like the pot thing, like pot leads to terrible. But anyways, but no, it's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope. It is.
Are you telling me? Oh wow, yeah, okay.
This one kills me personally.
What, that influential, that influence can't be a slippery slope to institutional? Of course it can. You don't think so, Chad?
No, I'm absolutely agreeing with that. I'm saying influential. I was going to say influential. Influence is a gateway drug for... Sorry,
institutional.
Institutional, yeah, there we go. Yeah. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, it was a joke.
Specifically burns me here.
I liked it. It didn't make me chuckle out loud, but I liked it. Go ahead, Gil.
This one burns me right here is the, do his students ever disappoint him? Oh yeah, I get disappointed when I see immaturity, he says. I was just talking to one member. His wife hates him. He's been overspending his capital in his marriage by working 14 hours a day on politics. That's disappointing me because if he is divorced, then what kind of credibility does he have? Does he really have long-term in the house to make moral judgments?
Yeah.
Now, this is what burns me about religious people. Get off your moral high horse, you piece of shit, because we're all garbage.
I think that's right.
Who are you?
I think that's right.
Who are you to sit here and say you now have no moral credibility because you got divorced? When for all you know, somebody got divorced because they were beaten, or somebody got divorced because they were treated like shit. Yeah. Like you doing a blanket statement like that, you can go fuck yourself.
This comes with the territory. I mean, you have to understand from his perspective. Divorce, like marriage especially, is extremely important in the eyes of God, and divorce is you know what I mean? Like you have to get that when you subscribe to these ideas, you know.
This kind of goes back to like being reasonable and like using common sense. So and this is what I want to say about it. When you read that first paragraph, the I get disappointed paragraph, it's like, all right, yeah, like that sounds like he's being too much of a workaholic and he's got a family and maybe his balance is out of whack. Like I agree, like I don't disagree with that paragraph, but then when he follows it up with the next
right,
when I'm like, really,
and it comes with the territory.
Because someone gets divorced, that means they have no claim to make moral judgments. Like really, oh God.
And for me, like, if the situation is described as one of these like rough situations, like someone's being abused and they get divorced. In fact, that gives them much more moral credibility because they have the nuts to do what is right in a very tough situation.
Well, and that's not right every time, but it's right more often than you would think.
If that is the case,
do you understand?
Dare you cast this moral judgment
do you
understand
upon the sanctity of marriage in the eyes of God? How dare you, Caleb?
Yes. Funny thing about the eyes of God, they're black holes and he's blind.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, dude. Now we're lobbing grenades left and right.
What timestamp was that? That one's a good one. No.
You better cut that one and that should be I'm gonna make that a t-shirt now.
Don't worry about
it. Hey Jamie, could you clip that for us? Could you clip that for us, Jamie?
On a quick side tangent about that, there is sometimes where I think that we say things that I don't think we say anything too incendiary, but there are some times where I'm like, oh, interesting. But anytime anybody, I think you guys both feel the same way I do. Anytime anybody disagrees with me about something, just come sit down and talk with me. Like, we don't have to do this thing where it's like, oh, Cyril or Cy or Conrad or Norundithus. Anyways, yeah. Oh, they said this
good pronunciation.
Weird thing.
Chad, but that's all right.
Oh, yeah. Cyril, Caleb, or Chad said this weird thing on the podcast, and they're terrible people for it. Like, or you could just come talk to me and I'll probably explain it to you and you just misconstrued it. Like, but anyways.
Or maybe even though, Cyril, maybe you were in the wrong, and maybe that person will come to you and say, "Hey, here's why you're wrong," and you go,
Sure.
"Holy shit, fair enough."
And I'll say exactly what I'll say.
Exactly.
There you go.
Well, I know you would,
Cyrillisms.
though. Cyrillisms.
There you go.
I want to say though, I
good
listen
stuff.
again.
Yeah.
I have to emphasize, I don't want. Oh wow, I don't want to shit. Yeah, there it
Puberty
is. Can we
just
clip
hit.
that, Jamie? Can we clip that?
Oh God. Go ahead.
So
Great
I don't want to
podcast.
shit. I don't want to shit on this guy too much because he is, again, it looks like he's being very transparent. It looks like, he's posting these
Yeah, that's good.
sermons online.
Sure, yeah.
I would be a lot more upset about this guy and about this prayer group if they weren't as transparent, but they are. So I can't shit on him too much. I want to say though, this little end bit, that this quote that they got from him is just amazing. Okay, so here we go. Is one of the emotion? It's literally the last 3 paragraphs, Caleb. If you want to scroll down, yeah. So it's one of the emotions is, who am I to be here? He says, kind of like Moses. Lord, I can't even speak. I'm just a jock with some bad knees, and here I am. Only you, God, could have done this. Why me? So that goes through my mind a lot, and I think that's healthy. But then there's the other standpoint where I sense that I've got 21 years of expositing the word of God, specifically to apply to the life of a public servant. So in that sense, I feel like I'm the most qualified guy in the world. I just love that he goes from absolute humble, why me, to God damn it, I can do this.
You know what pains me? And I remember feeling this way at not a really young age, but pretty young. It's this idea that like people will thank God for everything and take credit for absolutely
here we
nothing.
go.
So
It's dangerous
really,
territory. I love it.
Like really, none of it was you. Really, none of it was you. I have no problem if you believe in a higher power of any sort. If you believe in a God, or you're Christian, or this or that. That is no problem. It is no problem if you give credit to someone giving you strength, like an outside source. No problem. That's great, dude. Whatever gets you there, it gets hard. All right, whatever gets you there.
But it's all ordained.
But the idea that it's nothing with you, that you didn't work hard at it. Like seriously,
it's all ordained.
This Chad, I love that you said that because this shouldn't be controversial. This is me telling people like you did it. Like pat yourself on the back. And some people would still be upset with that. Some people would be like, no, to God be all the glory. And it's
dude,
like,
but to be fair, again, it comes with the territory. That is part of this. That's part of like the most the most fundamental part of that belief is that God is there. And he knows
that's fine.
He knows everywhere those chess pieces are going to go, and he has ordained all of it.
I know, and that's fine. If someone gets offended by what I say, and they want to have a conversation about that, and tell me why they think, I'll have that conversation with them. We're probably just going to agree to disagree, but I'll have that conversation with them. For me, it's like you can't even give yourself some credit. Like human beings have done some pretty great things.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
I get what you're saying. I love when I see like somebody has gone through some extraordinary trauma. They've gone through 19 emergency surgeries in a row, and they managed to survive and pull through the other side. And the person that's thanked the most is God. And it's like, well, you had 19 surgeries in a row. You had a bunch of teams of surgeons pouring over you, working their asses off.
Right.
And Chad, would you be opposed some credit? Surely,
Chad, would you be opposed to them saying like, "Oh, God deserves some of the credit"? No, I don't think you would.
No,
That's
of course not. But thank everybody.
There you go.
For me, this is starting to sound like the God of the Gaps argument for a lot of these people, right? Because if you were to, in my mind, if you were to approach somebody that was saying these things, right, and you would be like, "Yeah, but you worked really hard to study the Bible. Like God didn't study the Bible for you. You did." They would say, well, no, God gave me the strength, right? God gave me the wisdom. God gave me the smarts, the intelligence. God gave me this, right? He gave me all of these things that allowed me. But it turns into, because you can never quote unquote win that argument, because you can always say, well, God gave me that. God gave me the motivation to do it. God gave me the alarm clock to wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
God gave me the sneakers to start running. Like,
but again,
you'll never win that discussion, you know?
It comes with a territory, man. That is essential. You're touching on a central part of the belief system there. Like the idea is, who am I? I'm just some humble person, and everything that happens, praise be to God, glory be to God. You know, it comes with the belief system, man. It comes with the territory. I don't know. I mean, those are core tenets that, you can see what's maybe at fault there, or maybe some sort of inconsistency or something doesn't really seem right there, but that's part of the belief system.
For me,
Yeah.
what's triggering me and what I want to actually read more about, I actually want to read one of his sermons. Because there's something in here that I take personally, right?
I didn't
Right
go
here
that
he
deep, but
says
let's do it. Yeah.
he rails against environmentalist wackos, but wants to be good stewards of the environment.
I know, man.
I want to know what that means.
Well,
Well,
I have no idea what that means.
That
Well,
is-
look,
For me, as a hunter,
Yeah.
I consider myself a conservationalist,
sure.
and
Sure.
I would be interested to see what he means by saying that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe at some
I'm
point-
interested to hear what you think a conservationalist is, and what you think you are, or why you think you are one. Because a conservationalist to me would not be okay. I don't think, and Caleb can chime in right
Sure.
after this. I don't think that they would be okay with giving away public land that is used for hunting or used for pleasure or used for hiking or used for all these things that do public good, just giving it to corporations.
Nope.
Right. Just because we want to exploit them
Nope.
for whatever reason. It doesn't have to be
100
so evil or so good. Just
Oh,
whatever reason.
God,
You know?
you're such an environmentalist wacko.
No.
sir.
Oh, I
can't
know.
even
It's crazy. It's out of control.
say-
No, look, I don't. Nobody wants. When I hear, especially like in the past few years, about these people that get all upset about like the federal government owning land. Like nobody wants the federal government to just own all the land. That's stupid. But we can't live in a society where we section off beautiful places or places that have good hunting or places that have good hiking or places that have real benefit to just
Is there
us in
oil there?
general, in small factions to just use them. It just doesn't
There
make any
oil
sense.
there, dude? Open it
Dude,
up.
Dude, I don't give a mother. All right, and
That seems
by
like the
way,
priorities we have.
we
these
are not.
days,
It's not
though.
like this country, or it's not like this world, or even this country on our own producing levels is running out of oil. So like we don't need to just be like
No, I know.
exploiting it. If we get to the point where society's about to collapse and we have to just exploit this oil here, or else like it's over. Okay, then exploit the oil. But we are not there.
We're
Okay,
not.
So yeah.
What is
I want
that?
you guys to look at this picture right here.
Oh,
Is that a fort made out of bison skulls?
I want you to think about.
Well, that's sad as hell.
I
I've
want
seen
you
it
to think
before.
about what
I've
happens
seen it before.
when there's a
Yeah.
true. This is probably a good segue.
There's got to be a nice
true
balance. Yeah, sure.
free market on
I-
hunting.
I
in
remember-
1870.
Oh yeah, dude. I remember reading
Mhm.
about because buffalo, the buffalo around the plains of the city of Buffalo,
Yep.
or especially in the Midwest as well. Apparently, what these hunters would do is the buffalo were so present and in such great numbers that they would hop on these trains. They would hang out the window with their guns, and they would just fucking mow
seeing that in
these
social
bison
studies.
down. Right? Yeah, that's crazy. That is insane.
Yeah.
When you have unchecked hunting like that, that's
So I can't help but
crazy.
take advantage of that pivot because let's do free market now that he
Let's
said it.
do it. Yeah.
Oh, good.
That's a good
Let's
pivot
roll.
here.
By the
Well
way,
done.
Chad, solid article. I don't know where you found that, but
BBC News.
you were just clicking around BBC and found it, or you found it
Yeah,
on
it
Reddit
was front
through another
page.
source?
No, it was
There you
front
go.
page on BBC
So
News.
keep feeding us more of that in the future. That was great.
Absolutely.
I wrote down a few pros, a few cons on free market. That's, I guess, where we can start. So some of the things I wrote for pro, and by the way, right after I'm done, you guys can chime in. I'm sure I only have 5 things, so it's not like I have a lot. Pros for free market, right, are competition, innovation, and efficiency. Those are 3 big things that I could think of as far as pros. But cons are, wealth can get funneled at the top. You have to be careful in such extreme ways that society can become unstable. And runaway inequality can also make society in such a fast way become really unstable to the point where it doesn't really function anymore. Can you guys think of any more?
Yeah, I think actually this bison example is a perfect example, but that's probably more to what you're saying is it's unchecked capitalism. There has to be reasonable limits just to make the system sustainable. So I would absolutely agree with you there. In terms of other benefits of Free market, I mean, it's given us, as far as we know, one of the best standards of living in all of human history.
Who's we?
Sorry, well, obviously as Americans, but to a greater
America
extent,
doesn't
more.
exist in a free market. We don't exist in a totally free market, though.
No, but our economic system is capitalist.
Okay, so and that's I like that you brought that up. Are we talking about how we feel about capitalism or a free market? Because a free market is a free market.
Okay. Now
Yeah.
I
I
understand.
think I took this as specifically a completely free market.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's what I took it as too. And just
Okay,
what we
I
thought.
misunderstood a bit then.
Sure.
Free market works well when resources are plentiful and don't need to be managed by an outside source.
Right.
Right, and this is right here is a perfect example when you drive buffalo to damn near extinction just because you want to make some fertilizer,
right,
and some other bullshit. Like that's not a good thing for anyone.
Reckless.
Right, it's completely. I mean, just look at that. That man is probably 5'6", 5'7".
That's unbelievable.
You could stack 3, maybe 4 of him and reach the top of that.
So, and that's a good point, Caleb. I think a good so a good thing to talk about is if we did live in a society, and we might get there. I don't think we're going to see it, but we might get there eventually. If we did live in a society where things were so plentiful that even the least off of us could go home and be comfortable because we've innovated to such an extent that it's like WALL-E, right? At that point, tell me why we shouldn't have a free market at that point. I don't think there's any reasonable argument against it at that point. As long as the least of us, the thing that I always have against the free market that I get worried about is the least of us cannot be just left behind in any way as far as needs for a human being goes. Just to make sure that other people can grab so much that it just gets to the point where it's silly, you know?
I'm not.
So
I agree with
if
that.
yeah.
I'm not 100% sold on that though, Cyril.
Sure.
Like,
what do you? In what way?
There's
what do you mean?
There's that theory of like the bottom 10%, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, at what point would you like? What does truly living comfortable mean?
Your basic needs are fulfilled.
Affording food.
Yeah, but that's such a
standard housing.
Right? You can eat beans and rice and live. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
So what truly is a reasonable, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And my point to expand upon that as well.
Sure.
No matter how successful our society becomes, you will always have a bottom 10%. You know what I mean? And that bottom 10% is still going to want what the top 10% have.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not giving them you don't give these people top 10% because then at that point you're talking about capital.
But if
that's why inequality is always a good thing.
It's necessary. It's absolutely necessary.
I shouldn't say a good thing. Necessary.
Absolutely.
Because you need to motivate people, right? I don't have a problem with that. I just don't know why. It's just that we live already in an age of pretty good excess. We don't live in an age of excess to the point where even the least of us are fine. And I know that Caleb's pushing us to define what fine is, and I'll get there, but
sure.
We still live in an age of a lot of excess, and if I could
just whip a fact in there for you that might
go ahead. Oh sure. Breathe your wisdom into me.
I was going to say we live in an age where last year, at some point, 2.5 million children were homeless. That's what we're talking about. That's ridiculous. That's unacceptable in the richest country in the world. How do we leave that many people behind?
Yeah.
Now, again, I don't know how that number's collected, but I know that we do have a big problem with homelessness in America, which is crazy because we have.
And Chad just dropped out, so I'll give him time to come back. But as we move, so you of course you bring up a good point. Oh, there's always going to be the least of us. As we move forward, you're fine. I picked right up where you left off. As we move forward, okay, people will chafe at the idea that we provide. So Chad, I love that number, Chad. Why are there that many homeless children? Why can't we just pay to have a roof over their heads? Why can't society come together and say, let's make sure they have a roof over their heads? And what I mean by that is we live in such an age of excess that it's building quick houses. They don't have to be lap of luxury, just building like really quick buildings so we can have people have roofs over their head. Yeah, I think that's an okay thing to come together and try to address. right? Basic needs. Nobody wants these people to get handouts and go buy lobsters and stuff. No, there's got to be a way that can be controlled. But oh my gosh, basic needs for especially children.
Yeah.
Why can't we pay for a roof to be over these kids' heads?
Here's the difficult thing.
Oh, sure.
That I could see with that.
Go ahead.
Is that we do live in a society of freedom, right?
Okay, yeah.
And what I see, and this is not every single case, obviously, but when you have a situation where a child is hungry and without a home,
yep,
the first thing that we should do, right, is look to the parent and say, well, what's going on that you are not in a situation to do this? Now, a lot of them are, to be fair, right? It's very difficult to pay for childcare and health insurance on top of a good home, on top of food. Like, that's a lot of expenses.
Yeah, why wouldn't we look at what the problem is and try to fix it? I agree.
Absolutely, that's part of the problem. But then you have another part of the problem, which is right, drug use and alcohol use.
Oh, absolutely.
And at the end of the day,
you have a child. GFY. What do you want me to say to you?
Yeah.
Well, are you saying that we should?
Well, no. I mean, you can't regulate.
Not allow people to have children.
I'm saying that you are describing someone who abuses things, because I drink, we all enjoy ourselves from time to time, but you are describing people who absolutely cannot handle themselves to the point where they can't handle their responsibility. And if they can't be responsible, then they can't be responsible for a child who should have the same deserved roof over their head and food in their belly so that they can develop to succeed when they're adults. That's what I'm saying.
So let me pose another question on top of that then. Let's say you do have that situation and you take that kid away from that parent. It's also, there's the potential for you to be doing harm to the child because you're taking away their parent, right?
Oh, okay. Sure.
Like, that's a difficult thing that you do have to address.
Okay, so what harm would be there? I'm not saying there isn't, but like, what harm would that do to the child?
In order to put a roof over a kid's head and food in their belly, if you're not going to take this child away from the parent or parents, you're potentially enabling those parents to continue to do the same thing that they have been doing as well.
By taking away the kids?
No, by not taking away the kids, but making sure that they have a roof over their heads and food in their belly.
Yeah, screw them. I don't want to enable their.
All right, let's not say screw them.
Okay, not screw them. But look, if you don't demonstrate the responsibility level and even handle your own life, how do I trust you to raise a child? Sorry, game over. You lose. I don't.
Sure. But let's get into the true nitty gritty.
More birth control.
How many people right now do you think
that's not wrong
have a child that shouldn't have a child?
Of course. I mean,
I guess how much of a responsibility is that to the government? Like, that's a shitload of kids, and that's a ton of money.
How many people?
I'm not saying. Hold on.
How many people
I'm not
have
saying
a child
we shouldn't
young?
take care of them, but let's come from a perspective of reality. That's all I'm saying.
How many people have a child young when they shouldn't, and then once they do, buck up and tie their shoelaces and go and figure it out? A lot of people. Everybody doesn't just fall apart. Like, there's not this whole.
I hear you.
Sure. So it's not like we're spending money on gobs and gobs of people to make poor decisions. No, I think a lot of people will buck up. Not everybody, but there's a good amount of people that'll buck up and say, look, I'll take this. I'll bear this responsibility. It's time for me to be a parent. Some people still won't. And those people lose their right to have the children.
I think
not forever,
that you would be surprised.
And I think this is where,
as to how many people don't lose that right when maybe they should.
This is also,
and it's because of funding.
That's fair. I hate to lob this grenade, but I will. That's why you also should have a strong medical system. There's a lot of medical support system for people. There's a lot of reasons to have it, but one big reason is, look, if a parent's having a hard time because they're addicted to something and they're not working because of it and they're being generally S-baggy, we take the kid away. We say, you go straight to rehab and you need to fix yourself. We're going to pay for this because you have I don't want to say that we're going to force them in, but if they say, look, if they do admit and they say, I have a problem and I want my child back, what do I do? Okay, we're going to pay for you to go to this rehab for X amount of time. We're going to try to help you. We're not just going to say, like, nope, that's it. Get lost. No, we should try to help them.
Right. And I guess the
really
argument here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, these things, if you're talking about just a pure free market system, these things aren't considered. Like, you cannot ignore the fact that when we did have what looked a lot like pure free market in this country, late 1800s, early 1900s, it was awful. It was the conditions that children were being put through, let alone their parents, let alone the wages they were being paid and the hours they were being forced to work. I mean, unbelievable abuse.
When your worth comes down to dollars and
Unbelievable
cents,
abuse.
nobody cares.
Nobody
you're just
cares.
dollars and cents to them.
You're fucking peasants.
You'll work these 8-year-olds and we're not saying that they knew that they were despicable conditions. Maybe they didn't know breathing and some of the stuff that they did in the early 1900s. They probably didn't know that all the terrible things it did. But man, I mean, these kids were in these conditions where they were breathing and stuff that wasn't good and probably affected life. Yeah.
You had 8-year-olds in fucking coal mines. That is not even a joke.
I've said this once, to say it a million times. All right. I want to live in a society where we do everything we can to make sure that every child, from the time that they are born to the time we all agree that they're an adult, gets an equal opportunity to succeed. Gets education, gets food in their stomach, properly develops. Because food in your stomach, if you go hungry, that can affect your brain development, right? If you have a stressful life as a child, that can affect your brain development.
Well, dude,
I wish we could live in a society where we do all these things for these kids because they're kids. And then once they turn adults, we kick them out the front door and say, good luck. Here we go.
Hope we did right by you. Now do right by us.
Correct. And if you're an adult and you can't keep your crap together, then you can get lost.
Dude, I think despite whatever society you live in, whatever the government is, whatever the system, the belief system is, any society that doesn't do right by raising their children, raising their youth is going to fall apart. You have to take that. These are literally going to be the next citizens running the society that you now inhabit. Take care of your kids. Give them a fucking opportunity. Yeah. Let them grow properly. And if you don't do that, your society is doomed.
And by the way, I think that we do a pretty generally good job of that. We were disadvantaged growing up. Don't forget that. Yeah.
There's also,
we can do better.
I hate to put it this way, but there's
2.5 million homeless kids. But go ahead, sorry.
Well, I've been reading into that number, but we'll talk. All
right, we'll talk later, fam. Go ahead.
Sure.
We're way off of the free market thing at this point. But the other thing that I do find interesting, though, is that there are some, very few, but there are some quote unquote success stories out of these terrible situations.
Yeah, that's
a lot having to do with the arts, right? Artists, comedians,
comedians specifically,
entertainers, right? They a lot of them come from really fucked up situations, and you would not have had that.
And that goes back to the whole if you have a kid when you shouldn't, but a lot of people.
By no means am I trying to justify it. I just find it interesting because if you didn't have that, you might not have as many really good comedians.
I know what you're saying,
right? But then who would you have otherwise? You know what I mean? What would you have otherwise if those situations didn't exist? Because I guarantee you that that terrible upbringing, that angst that it might form, it can really help define a person, or what I shouldn't say
destroy
define.
Them.
Absolutely. Well, that's what I'm saying. How many people are able to take those terrible conditions and are able to flourish despite that? I would say it's a very small number.
Sure.
I would say that a lot of people who find themselves in that situation unfortunately become conditioned into a cycle of just repeating that life for themselves and also bringing up children in those types of ways. Obviously, that's not true for all of them, and I would maybe argue for most of that. That's a tough cycle. That's a tough situation to be in if you are exposed to these terrible types of situations growing up. I mean, that can really destroy a person, man, to the point where they just become that. And that I don't know, man. But I do get what you're saying.
So let's pause from here because this is a discussion that we could get into quite a bit.
Yeah,
let's
that's
go back
way
to the free
different.
market
Let's go to
deal.
free market. Right.
And for me, free market works if the rules work. Or no, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. Having capitalism, having the appropriate regulation and rules, only works if the rules themselves actually work. And I feel like that's where we are as a society now, as an economy, is that the rules they're not really working that well.
I would say I would agree with that, but I would also say the other biggest factor is just consumer awareness. If you are a consumer in an absolute free market and you are absolutely aware of all your choices, all of these companies, everything, you know what I mean? Like as a consumer, hold that power. If you had all that information, the market would work perfectly because the consumer would buy in their own best interest, and that would just regulate the market naturally.
Right. So let's use an example right now. My favorite example, the cable industry.
Sure. It's a great one.
That doesn't work.
I was going to say, how are you going to tie that in?
It doesn't work. I'm fully educated as to my options here in my area for the cable industry. And I have one.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have options. Right. Again, you're saying the system we need to have a system in place that encourages free market.
And I was thinking about this the other day, and I was like, I'm in Wegmans, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm walking through the cereal aisle, and damn, there's a shitload of cereal.
It's a lot of cereal.
And I start, this is what a free market should be, right? All these different options that I have for my cereal.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I look closely at who owns all the cereal, and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't really have a fucking choice.
Yeah,
I'm still giving my money to one corporation or two.
Kellogg's
in this case, it's either Wegmans or it's Kellogg's.
Yeah. Right.
There's no.
Yeah, that's interesting. You bring that up because this is a slight branch, and keep me on track if it goes way too far out on the branch.
Sure.
But
branch out.
Yeah, free market advocates do not advocates. But anyways, people who generally support free markets, they do like them because of competition heavily, right? Competition. They're like competition. Okay. But if we do have a free market where we allow other companies to swallow other companies up at such a rate that competition kills itself, but it came out of a free market, like I just feel like even if you're a competition advocate, I'm loving it. I'm right there with you. But you have to admit that a free market, especially if you let companies swallow other companies up, that's what I think we shouldn't necessarily let happen so much. I don't want to go too deep into those authoritarianism waters, but because we'd be basically not picking winners and losers, but we would be telling people that they can't. But if you don't let people swallow other people up, it's better. Yeah. If you let people, if you have a totally free market where you can swallow other companies, no problem, that you compete with, then that's a bad ending too. And that's got to be a part of the conversation.
No, it definitely is.
Yeah,
I think
and you need a power to intervene somehow to figure that out, or else it'll just be bad.
And we're also talking about. I just want to throw this in there as well. We're talking about horizontal acquisitions.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
You're talking about same products.
Right.
We're not even necessarily aware of the vertical acquisitions. Like there might be a company out there that literally owns a product from A to Z, and you have no idea.
Dude,
I'm okay with that though.
I'm not.
Are you?
Hang on. In my utopic system that I'm about to describe, I'm okay with that because, and I had to qualify by saying my utopic. If you're a company that vertically, there you go. If you're a company that vertically you're trying to compete in all these markets, but you're not acquiring anybody to do it, you're just investing in research and development and trying to front a product in that environment yourself. I don't have a problem with that. It's the horizontal ones that are way worse because the biggest company can slowly start to eat all the other ones up until there's only like one company left.
But let me pause you for a minute.
Sure.
In theory, a company that wanted to go horizontal and is unable to acquire a business could say, okay, we're going to go vertical first, and we're going to buy up the raw product. We're going to buy the company that produces the raw product, and then I'm going to go to that person that I tried to buy and say, guess what? I'm going to charge you 3 times cost.
Yeah.
Now, that is forcing a horizontal acquisition. That happens.
Yeah. No, I would agree.
And look, that context matters. The supply chain, really quickly, Chad, if I can say, that context matters. Caleb, you're not wrong. If your A to Z is a whole part of a process that ends up making a product, then that's bad. That's also a certain kind of domination over. But once again, I think you're not wrong about that. But once again, if it's a company that's doing their own R&D and fronting their own, they're not just acquiring another company. They're saying that company is part of our process. Let's try to do something on our own that competes with them to do it better. You still have competition there. The horizontal is way scarier because you end up with no competition.
Dude, it's a slippery name of the game there is vertical acquisition is the gateway drug to horizontal acquisition.
Now, the reason, and I'll play devil's advocate against myself. The reason I do agree with you guys is if you end up competing so well that you put them out of business, now it gets tough. Now, if they put other things out of business because they were so powerful, and then when they spread out that power from A to Z, they just killed the rest of the competition, not necessarily bought them out. Now you end up with no competition again. Once again, the name of the game is competition, and there's none there, and that's bad. So it gets
So
tough.
let me ask you this: what is an ideal amount of producers or creators? I guess I can't think of any other word.
Enough
to
to where
create a competition, right? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 10?
No,
What
no,
is
no.
that number?
it's
Right.
What
it
is
should
that
only
minimum number?
the only concern should be
depends on the
is
market. Mhm.
Sure,
well,
that's fair.
absolutely.
It depends on the part of the market. But go
Enough.
ahead.
Right, that's fair.
It has to be
Let's
enough
say end
where a
product.
enough to be where a company is looking over their shoulder. Enough to
Yeah,
where a company
there you
has
go.
to be
That's not a bad
concerned
way to
about
put it.
how the other guys are innovating, how they're beating us, and how we can compete with
Sure.
that. Because you can, with these acquisitions, you don't need a monopoly to dominate an industry. You need 2 or 3 large
not at all.
conglomerates who all come together and agree that these are the prices we're going to pay. These are the innovations we're going to fund. This is the R&D we're going to fund. We're going to move at the pace that we all agree to move at. That's not competition. That's everybody patting each other on the shoulder saying, we're making shitloads of money. Let's not innovate. Let's not compete. This is working for all 3 of us. Let's slow down a bit.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing that's happening too is that you've got a large group of people, entrepreneurs, that are developing a product and or service or a new innovation to a product or service. And by the time that is about to come to fruition, that's when the big company says, all right, I'll give you $500 million for your company.
Right.
And that, to a singular person, is much more appealing than to a board, potentially, of people, right?
Well, I would bring up a specific example that
Sure.
affected all 3 of us. In the state of New York, Uber was blocked for a very long time. Lyft was blocked for a very long time because there is a industry that is rooted here that very much had a dominant control of the market that didn't want to see that competition. Why would we want to compete with cheaper fares, more convenient apps? You know what I mean? Like,
government should be
spend a lot of
fostering
money.
more competition, and that's another example of government stepping in and helping out the local taxi companies. And look, we don't know the whole story, and I totally admit that. But at face value,
At face value, it looks bad.
stepping in, helping out the local taxi companies, not have to compete more, and I don't like that because it can cut both ways.
Not.
Yeah, it can cut both ways there. Government can step in and
But let's also talk
screw
about
it
what
up
ultimately
by
happened.
yeah.
What ultimately happened?
No, yeah, no, exactly.
Uber and
Yeah.
Lyft got
of
in.
course.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
We don't live in some crazy like authoritarian. It's like
but I guess the point there
post-apocalyptic
is too
society.
is
It
that
still works, but
I guess the point there too is, and I forgot who talked about this, but if you have an educated consumer base that can look across to California and say, "Hey, wait a minute,
Exactly.
I want that. Why don't we have that?"
right.
I think that's so integral to a free market. And I think it actually, you could argue that in this, as we progress in this day and age, you could loosen up some of these regulations on markets just because consumers really are a lot more aware these days. Let's say I'm in Walmart and I'm looking at keyboards. I can pull up on my phone immediately other user reviews. I can look at how people have rated this. What kind of returns are on the keyboard? How can I expect it to how long can I expect it to last? Like a self-aware consumer is such a vital part of free market not becoming this wild, out of control oligarchy type bullshit. At least in my opinion, I think it's one of the biggest factors. You have to have
but I think the other thing too, though, is that you picked a very specific market there, right? When it comes to technology, there's a huge group of people and consumers that are constantly trying to make videos and get data on how good a CPU is or how good a keyboard will last or whatever the case may be. You don't have that in every single other.
I would say you would have it in most markets. I don't think there are more monopolies than not. Ooh, sorry about that. Apologies for that.
No worries. It happens.
Unfortunately,
I don't know. There's other things that go on too. Like for example, here we have a company I won't name, but they make pasta sauce, right? They literally are the ones that actually make every single pasta sauce that goes to your local grocer. All they do is just change the ingredients based on the based on the company's specifications.
That's
like
fair.
What?
Yeah. Okay.
What?
So again, you need both. You need the consumer side to be aware and to be in the know, and you need the government side to understand how to properly encourage competition and discourage those conglomerate type businesses.
But there's
Yeah.
also another argument to be had. When you have non-competition, in theory, and I say this very specifically, in theory, you have more resources to be able to do things that maybe you wouldn't have been able to do had you been competing against somebody. There's an argument to be said for that, too.
Yeah, but that works when you have a company that, honest to God, has good intentions. And
You're correct, but I feel like I do have to point that out, that there is the potential for that.
that's fair. There's a potential for socialism to work perfectly well.
There is.
You know what I mean?
Very
Like,
true.
unfortunately, again, like,
But, like, hold on. So, hold on. Let's pause real
Sure.
quick. Let me give you a better example.
sure.
Sure.
Like, for example, the cable industry, which I'm very fond of and know quite a bit about. The cost that is required
A sentence known
in
as
order
something
to
said
just
before.
set something up is astronomical, and it wouldn't work from the get-go. You have to acquire a company. You have to move in such a way that you can get existing infrastructure, right? So there's an argument to be said there, like, okay, by acquiring companies as opposed to competing directly against them, you could, in theory, this doesn't happen, but in theory, you could commit significantly more resources to improving infrastructure than you would have because you're too busy trying to tell somebody that your service is better than this
Well,
other guy.
maybe
Again, this is a perfect world scenario.
Of course, I understand. And I would argue that things like the internet, things like water and electricity should be public utility. I mean, when we are almost required to have access to these things, and everyone is required to have access to these things, you might as well make it sort of a sponsored public utility. We all pay a tax, we all benefit from it. And you could say the same thing about healthcare. Again, that's a different conversation, but we all have to participate in it. We all have to have it. Why would you leave that up to the free market? Especially when it's so important to just daily life. And internet has become that. It absolutely has. So, I don't know.
So just like with every other conversation we ever have, the conclusion here is that you need a healthy balance of both free market and regulation in order for things to work successfully.
Interesting how that works, dude.
That's so fucking weird.
That up. I'm glad that you brought up that up real quick because, like we always like you said, like that always happens when we talk about it. There's two sides. There might be some more of us that agree with one side more than the other, but we all know that there's two sides. So what does that mean? Especially for that, you need good leadership because at that point the balance it's tough to achieve, and you have to be someone that has common sense and is open to having conversations like that and admitting that. So leadership is really important.
That's perfect.
It is, but at the end of it all, right, what we do best as humans is we are like a seesaw.
I know.
You go to one side of the boat.
Unfortunate.
So hateful.
Overcorrect to the other side of the boat.
As a whole, we're very slow to move. We're very slow to react. You know, that's
you get
very unfortunate fact. But I want to just a little bit expand on what you just said, because I think that's very profound. Like, obviously there are these systems we all subscribe to, these systems that we live within, capitalism and democracy being those types of things. But like all systems, when it's rooted in humans just being humans, the system can so easily fail, right? We need good leadership. And I would say we also need well-informed citizens. You know, it's work.
Absolutely
are work. We always have to be putting work into it, paying attention to who's trying to corrupt the system, paying attention to who's trying to conglomerate power and take things over. It's work. And you know, some people get sick of it. Some people get tired of it. And that's when capitalism fails, is when we stop participating. It's when we stop being educated consumers. It's when we stop being aware of of the fact that our actions have very real consequences on that system. The Matthew effect. What is this?
Yeah, we
Mhm.
talked about this, and I think me and Caleb talked about this in one of just mine and
did.
Caleb's pods.
Yep.
And that's not wrong.
It's very
That's
important
not
to bring that
wrong.
up when we talk about free markets, in my opinion, is the Matthew effect.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Oh,
So the
accumulated.
Matthew effect.
It's not so cut and
No,
dry, but
So the Matthew effect again, and again, it comes from the parables of Jesus. For everyone who is, to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who has not, even what he has will be taken away. It's biblical origins that it comes from, but the short and dirty of it is
it's true.
it's easier to accumulate wealth if you already have wealth,
Of course, yeah.
right? And I feel like we're getting closer to that edge where I don't want to use the word reset, but breaking up a monopoly or two might be a pretty good idea.
I would say more than 2, but yes, I totally agree. I mean, again, this absolutely relates in the sense that like these things
There's a reason why
there's
a reason why a lot of us look at Trump and say, yeah, you got a loan of $1 million. You know what the fuck I could do with that?
Right.
So when Trump rails against Amazon, when I first just hear like, oh, Trump's railing against Amazon, my first instinct is like, oh, maybe Amazon should have more competition. Maybe. But then I look at his arguments and he's such a child. He literally only just hates Jeff Bezos and the Washington Post, and so he just goes after him.
Whereas
if he railed against Amazon in the right ways, I would be putting my fist in the air and being like, let's go. You're not wrong. But he's an idiot and his arguments are stupid.
Oh,
Amazon
swinging. Nice. Dude.
Amazon is tough though, because Amazon provides the vehicle for companies to be competitive. And that's what I find interesting.
Sure.
But Amazon also is becoming a conglomerate themselves. They have a lot of wealth, and they are.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
And I'm not disagreeing with that. Position of not knowing everything, so obviously.
That as well. This is from a position of ignorance, but from what I see, it's a company,
big one,
in a group that has created a space for people to be competitive, and that's what I find interesting. Almost like Etsy, for example.
Craigslist.
Right? I don't know if you guys know of Etsy. Craigslist.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the
instead of producing a product, you're creating a space of which people can move product.
Yeah. Wow, Craigslist is free, whereas Amazon makes a bit of money.
Oh no, for sure. But like Etsy,
but I see what you're
money.
saying.
But again,
why can't we have a marketplace like that where, like, Amazon has a bit of a hand in terms of, yes, they provide a space for people to sell things, but they also get very involved in selling those things. And they're also very interested in becoming the seller of those things.
Yeah. But in a perfect world.
Right, of course. Well, I'm saying a place like Craigslist where it is, you've got, it's like an HTML, very simple type of just a marketplace, literally an open area. Whereas I would imagine an Amazon, if you would imagine as a real marketplace, you got to pay $5. You got to pay $20 to sell your wares there. Whereas a Craigslist is, dude, bro, we're just giving you a space. Go for it. You know what I mean?
Hell yeah, it's powerful.
Well, I think the interesting thing would be, and this is wrought with all sorts of bullshit that we could go over, but
oh, absolutely. I'm sure
an idea would be the government creating, and I hate to say this, but the government, though, is the one responsible for creating the space in which people can sell their wares.
Whoa, excuse me?
Right? If the government was the one running Amazon, kind of like how they run the U.S. Postal Service.
Well,
right? If they were the ones that ran the marketplace, as far as the infrastructure is what I should say, right? I mean, they're already responsible for the roads.
True.
Why couldn't they be responsible for maintaining the marketplace in which people can sell their goods and services?
I don't know about that one. Dude.
But providing a Craigslist, stretch. Imagine it being like just providing a Craigslist type service, where a lot of it is consumer side and seller side, and
that's fair.
Not the government. Fair. And you know what?
I don't even know if Craigslist makes money or how, because I don't see ads on their site.
They do.
They do.
Do they?
They do.
You
can put
premium postings pay more.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Well, something gets popular, you might as well milk it a little bit.
You're right. Well, as long
as the government got to pay for the servers.
You're right. Yeah, see, that's true. But
Yeah,
that's not
of
that's not a
course.
huge expense though. That's
It's not
So-
considering what's on Amazon's.
Right.
Sorry.
Correct.
Yeah,
Or
considering
what's on
Amazon
Craigslist.
service. Right.
So yeah, so as long as they're not profiting off of it so much so that it's going past their like minimal operational costs, then yeah, government could do that. As long as they're not prioritized, but then government can
Right,
start
of
picking
course.
winners and losers because that's so powerful.
They
Like
could.
Amazon,
Right, and that's-
Amazon,
and
And it's like,
Amazon
do
can
I
pick-
trust the government? Do I
Amazon
trust the
can
free
pick
market?
winners and losers. They can if
Well,
they want
course.
to.
Chad,
They both
actually,
can, right.
Chad, let's be clear. You're not choosing the government over the free market there. You're choosing the government over Amazon at this point.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Sorry.
Like,
Do I
who do you trust more?
Do I trust a government source entity to do right by me, or do I trust a free market sourced entity to do right by me? Because both
I
of
would
them,
say a government.
both
but,
of
you know.
them. What do you mean you wouldn't say government?
I would say government because the government at least
Oh,
is voted in by
right.
the people and has to be
No,
responsible.
see,
Private
yes.
industry can do whatever it wants. It's
But
private.
you could
industry.
say a private industry is still beholden to not piss off people who use their
Yes,
service.
but
You know what I
yes,
mean? Like that's
yes,
kind of the same
yes,
idea.
I agree.
But the
there
problem
are-
is
there
that
are ways-
unless you
there
have
are ways
another
where-
place,
Mhm.
unless you have another place to
Right.
bring your dollars, you're
Right.
fucked either way, and they can do whatever they
Right.
want.
Yeah. True.
I've always been interested in the idea because there is when we talk about free market and we talk about things like healthcare, there's always this huge conversation between who's more efficient, who could be more efficient at healthcare. If we tasked the government with running healthcare, or if we left it entirely up to free markets, who could do it better? But I think that
Pros
there's
and cons to
something.
both. Jesus.
What's that?
There's pros and cons to both.
Of course there are, but
You just have
why
to figure
can't
out which
we
one you
have
agree with more?
Why
Yeah.
can't we have a space where free market exists, but the government can also provide their own subsidized service to people who
No,
maybe
I
want to
know.
opt into it? Like, let's open free market.
That's called the
up
Affordable Care Act, bro. Go look it up.
to some extent.
To some extent, but
Kind of.
no, it's actually.
Not
I don't know, man. You gotta
really.
look that shit up, bro. Look it up. Just saying.
But you're still beholden to insurance companies. Like, yeah,
Who
the
is?
individual's not paying it, but the government sure as hell is.
What do you mean? Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, dude, it gets tough. Yeah, I mean, and then yeah.
What I'm saying is if you could provide an environment where, okay, so as a citizen, I can opt into this healthcare system. Obviously, it's way more complex than this, but I'm just using this as an example.
Sure.
As a citizen, I can opt to pay taxes, opt into the government's healthcare, and go through whatever system they have been able to provide with the money they have. Or as a citizen, I can
Yeah,
opt
I
into
don't
the free
disagree with that.
market, and I
Yeah.
can go through the system that they've been able to provide. I think that would
Yeah, I don't disagree
set
with
it up
that.
between free market and government, and a consumer can choose between either, whatever it is they believe could do a better job at what that industry is.
Yeah,
That's something, man.
the power that government will
Yeah,
always have in
but
that
there's
scenario
also a
is the fact that it reaches everybody and it is so much larger than anything else, even the largest insurance company. So the power government would have is all you'd have to do is check your box on your taxes and you'll just add a little bit of money. It's just so easy to do that would be leverage for them. And guess what? I want to see it happen. You know I do.
I don't know. there's
yeah, but the
something to be said
difficult part there though is that
Sure.
then me as a private insurance company would be like, all right, well, I'm competing for premium clients. I don't give a fuck about the little
Well,
guy.
then do better. Then
That's
compete.
fine. The
No,
little
why
guys
do I
get
have to do
served by
better? I
the-
don't have to do better.
Okay, so then how are you going to compete?
I'm gonna
That's a
compete
bad
with your
argument.
premium.
That's a
Yeah,
bad.
I'm going to
I
compete
think
with
that's
your premium customers. What happens is that you have the free market that does not give an option.
You have a free
right?
market that's hungry
And hold
for
on,
money.
hold on. Right. Well, they also don't give an option for those people who are poor, and that
Okay.
saddles the government already
Okay.
right from the get-go with a
I
bunch
did
of costs.
I did say that
No.
healthcare is kind of a bad example because it doesn't
Okay,
translate
that's fair.
well.
That's fair.
There's a lot more caveats there, but I guess the bigger idea I'm trying to say is that if government and free market, if we constantly have this argument about who can run an industry better, give them both a fucking shot and let them both be part of the competition.
I think that's why I'm not opposed to that idea. There's obviously nuanced parts of it that
Absolutely.
might not work that way,
Absolutely.
and you have to address that, which maybe Caleb's saying. But like,
Of
no, yeah, I
course.
think at face value, like, look, what's the best way to we've been talking about competition for half an hour. What's the best way to do it than let them face off?
Right, dude.
There's got to be a way we can do that. I think that's right. That sounds pretty good.
I don't know. For me, that's always been an interesting thought. Is like, oh, we have to argue till we're blue in the face about one or the other. Let them
Or we
both
could
compete.
just let
Let them
them
both compete.
square off. And guess what? If government it does try to do it and try to run like an insurance company, but then they end up doing the government thing that they do and taking the money and allocating it somewhere else and pissing it away, then all right, then
Bro, I got the free market.
it's not going to correct.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, no,
So I don't know. I mean, obviously, there's so many asterisks there, so many
Or if the
caveats.
free- yeah,
there,
or
but-
if, or yeah. And on the other
I
side,
think one of these days we're gonna have to start actually like
Mhm.
focusing on like a case study within an idea.
sure, I wouldn't be opposed to that.
just really
You
get
know.
into the weeds.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
just
fair.
really lose ourselves down the rabbit hole.
We would,
really
we
get
would have
fucked
to.
up.
That would be a very homework-driven podcast.
Oh, for
though.
sure, for sure.
Yeah, I would be. I'm not.
But it's worth
I'm not
exploring.
I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to like, dude, if you ever are motivated about something enough that you would do your homework and you're like, hey, Cyril, and I've always said this, hey, Cyril, if you are motivated about this too, look into it. You have time at Saturday at 6:30, the half hour, just go really into the nuanced parts of these things. I'd be like, sure, that could be its own thing. I don't care, man. Whatever you want to do, whatever motivates you. That's what I'm looking for.
That's
I wanna
Well, I
keep
think
it-
the other thing that I want to do
I
at some
think that's
point.
important. Well, I think I always say I want to keep it simple, which keeping it simple is important because it's just easier to do and we'll get it done.
yeah.
And we've done a good job with that. But I think part of keeping it simple could even be picking things that motivate you because then it's simple to look it up, right? Because you're motivated.
Right.
So yeah, we can do one-offs.
I
like
think
that. Go
at
ahead,
some
Caleb.
point this is going to turn into potentially once in a while one of us just monologuing
Oh
about
god.
something that really impassions one of us, and then the other two just being
Yeah,
like,
good.
I hear what you're saying, but what about this? And then that person
no,
just
yeah.
like continues to monologue.
No,
Yeah.
I hope.
Kinda already
I
do
hope-
that.
I
All right,
hope-
all right. As we,
But yeah.
let's wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up.
Dude, that was a solid discussion though. So
Good, man.
yeah.
Definitely more than 40 minutes though, Cyril. Because you did say at the 40-minute mark, man, I'm gonna stop us.